Millionaire's deaf daughter lost all hope until a single dad whispered, "I'll help her." Leela Moore sat by the window of her bedroom, staring at the world outside. Her small fingers traced the patterns on the glass as sunlight poured in, illuminating the plush, luxurious room she lived in. Everything around her was expensive, beautiful, and perfectly arranged. The thick velvet curtains, the polished wooden floor, the shelves lined with toys and books, but none of it mattered to her. Leela felt trapped in a golden cage. She was 12 years old, but she often felt younger, not because of her size or appearance, but because she couldn't join the world the way other children did. Leela was born deaf, and though she could read lips and write messages, she struggled to express herself freely. Her world was quiet, not the soft, peaceful kind of quiet that made one feel calm, but a lonely, isolating silence that seemed to grow heavier with every passing day. Her father, Richard Moore, was a man who had everything in life: money, respect, and influence, but he had little time for his daughter. He was always traveling, attending meetings, or negotiating deals that shaped the course of his business empire. Leela admired her father from afar, watching him in videos on her tablet, seeing the way people bowed to him, the way he commanded attention. But to her, he was almost a stranger. She longed to hear his voice, to feel him truly understand her, but there was always a wall between them. Tutors came and went, each one trying in their way to teach Leela how to communicate better. They were skilled and patient, but they treated her like a project rather than a child with feelings. "Repeat after me," they would say. "Can you do this?" They wanted results, not a connection. And while Leela could learn words, sentences, and even write essays that would impress anyone, none of it filled the empty space inside her. She wanted someone to see her, not just her abilities, but her heart, her thoughts, her dreams. Most days she would sit in her room, writing in her notebook. She filled page after page with drawings, doodles, and stories no one would ever read. Sometimes she imagined speaking to someone who would understand her completely. Someone who would not just see the surface, not just marvel at her intelligence, but truly understand the little girl who wanted to laugh freely, play, and feel normal. Outside her window, the gardens of the Moore estate were vibrant and full of life. Flowers of every color bloomed, and the fountains sparkled in the sunlight. Servants moved quietly along the pathways, making sure every corner was perfect. Leela would watch them sometimes, imagining what it would be like to run barefoot across the grass, to chase after butterflies, or to call out to someone and hear them answer. But in her world, sound did not exist. The laughter of other children, the barking of dogs, the chatter of people in the garden, all of it was invisible to her. Her mother had passed away when Leela was very young, leaving her in the care of Richard and a team of caregivers. She barely remembered her mother's face or voice, but she often wondered if her mother had understood her better than anyone else. Sometimes, late at night, when the mansion was quiet and shadows stretched across the walls, Leela would imagine her mother sitting beside her, holding her hand, whispering words that would reach her heart even if she could not hear them. School had always been a challenge. Though she was taught at home by private tutors, Leela sometimes attended special classes for children who were deaf. She liked being around them because for the first time she did not feel out of place. But even there, she felt invisible in different ways. Some children were confident and loud, using sign language fluently, while she still struggled to express herself naturally. The fear of making mistakes held her back. She often kept her hands folded in her lap, watching others interact, wishing she could join them without hesitation. The loneliness sometimes became overwhelming. Leela's nights were the hardest. She would lie in her large bed, staring at the ceiling, wishing for a sound she had never truly heard, wishing for someone to tell her she mattered. The mansion was quiet at night, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears, even when you cannot hear it. Servants moved silently through the halls, and the rooms were dark except for the soft glow of nightlights. She often felt like she was living in a bubble, separated from the world outside, unable to touch it, unable to feel it. Despite her sadness, Leela had a spark within her, a small flame that refused to die out. She loved to draw, and her sketches filled her notebooks. She loved stories, and she would spend hours creating her own worlds in writing, but she feared showing her work to anyone. What if they did not understand? What if they thought her drawings were childish or her stories foolish? It was easier to keep her creations private, a secret part of herself that no one could touch. On one particular morning, Leela sat at her desk, her pencils scattered around her, and tried to draw the world she longed for. She drew herself outside, running with other children, their laughter filling the air, the sun warming their faces. She drew a man with kind eyes, someone who could see her, someone who could help her find her voice. As she worked, her small hand trembled slightly. For the first time in a long while, she imagined the possibility that she could be more than the silent girl who hid behind closed doors. But reality always pulled her back. Her father's footsteps echoed faintly in the mansion as he hurried to his office. He waved at her briefly, his mind clearly elsewhere, already thinking about the meetings and calls awaiting him. Leela waved back, but it felt empty. There was no connection, no warmth, just the distance that had always been there. She sighed and returned to her drawings, feeling the weight of the silence pressing down again. Even with all the money in the world, Leela felt poor. She did not have friends who understood her. She did not have a voice that could reach anyone's heart, and she did not have someone who could help her believe in herself. The golden walls around her felt like barriers, and every luxury seemed to highlight her loneliness. She longed for something simple, someone to talk to, someone to laugh with, someone to tell her that it was okay to be herself. And yet, deep down, she had not completely given up hope. She did not know how it would happen or when, but she believed that one day, someone would come into her life and see her, really see her. Someone who would help her break free from the silence and feel alive in the world she had only imagined. That small spark of hope flickered quietly inside her heart, waiting for the moment when it would be fanned into light. Leela's world, so quiet and contained, began to change one sunny afternoon. It was a rare day when her father had no urgent meetings, and the mansion's gardens were unusually empty. Leela, as was her habit, had gone to her favorite spot near the large fountain that sparkled under the sunlight. She sat there sketching, her pencils moving across the paper, trying to capture the beauty she could see but not hear. The water danced and shimmered in the sunlight, and the flowers around the fountain nodded gently in the breeze. As she drew, she noticed someone sitting on the nearby bench. He wasn't a servant or a tutor. He seemed ordinary, not wearing anything fancy, just casual clothes that were slightly worn. He had a little boy with him, maybe 5 or 6, who was playing with a small toy truck on the grass. What caught Leela's attention wasn't their appearance, but something different in the way the man looked at his son. There was patience, care, and a quiet understanding in his eyes. Leela watched for a few minutes, fascinated. She had never seen a father interact with his child this way. The man was teaching the boy sign language. His hands moved gracefully, forming symbols that the boy imitated with concentration and joy. Leela had studied sign language herself, but watching it done naturally, lovingly, was something entirely different. The boy laughed silently when he got a sign right, and the man's eyes lit up with pride. For the first time in a long time, Leela felt drawn to someone. She wanted to know who this man was, why he seemed so patient, and how he could make his son feel so seen. Her curiosity was stronger than her shyness, so she moved a little closer, sitting on the fountain's edge, pretending to adjust her pencils. She tried to watch them without being noticed, but it was impossible not to notice the warmth between the father and son. The man suddenly looked up as if sensing her presence. His eyes met hers, and instead of frowning or turning away, he smiled. There was no judgment, no surprise, only a quiet acknowledgement that she was there. Leela froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. He waved slightly and then returned his attention to his son. Something about him made her feel safe, the way few people ever had. She wanted to go closer but felt too nervous. The man, noticing her hesitation, did something unexpected. He leaned slightly toward her and whispered, barely moving his lips, "I'll help you." Leela's heart skipped a beat. His words weren't loud, but somehow she understood them. The idea that someone might help her, really help her, not with lessons or corrections but with understanding, felt like a small miracle. She had waited for years, silently hoping, dreaming that someone would see her, and here he was, offering help without even knowing her. From that moment, Leela returned to the fountain whenever she could. The man, Daniel, as she would later learn, was always there, teaching his son or just sitting quietly. Over time, he began noticing her more deliberately. Sometimes he would smile at her from across the garden. Sometimes he would make small gestures, asking simple questions with his hands, showing her that she could respond if she wanted to. At first, Leela was shy. She didn't know how to speak to him and she feared making mistakes, but Daniel never pressured her. He was patient, giving her space to grow comfortable. One day, he placed a small notebook and a pencil near her while they both sat at the fountain. He wrote a simple question on the paper. "Do you want to play?" Leela's eyes widened. She hesitated for a moment and then scribbled back, "Yes." Daniel's face lit up with encouragement, and he began teaching her small signs, words she had only learned academically, through games and drawings. Leela laughed silently as she copied his hand movements, feeling a strange joy that she had not felt in years. Their meetings became a routine, something Leela looked forward to each day. She began noticing other things about Daniel. He was a single father, working hard to provide for his son, yet he always seemed calm, patient, and full of kindness. He never complained about the difficulties of life, and he always found a way to make learning fun. Leela admired him, though she didn't fully understand why. She only knew that with him she felt free to be herself. One afternoon, Daniel taught her a new word in sign language, hope. He formed the letters slowly, showing her the movements and encouraged her to repeat them. Leela struggled at first, her hands shaking, but he guided her gently. When she finally signed it correctly, Daniel clapped his hands softly and smiled. For the first time, Leela felt the word's meaning in her heart. It wasn't just a lesson, it was a promise, a feeling she had almost forgotten. As weeks passed, Leela's confidence grew. She began trying new signs, forming simple sentences, and even telling Daniel about her day at the mansion, the books she read, and the drawings she made. She realized that she could communicate not just words but feelings, and that someone could truly understand her without judgment. Her world, once so quiet and lonely, was beginning to open up. But it wasn't only learning that changed her. Daniel's presence brought light to her life in unexpected ways. He taught her small life lessons without saying them aloud. By watching how he treated his son with love and respect, Leela learned the meaning of patience and kindness. By seeing him persevere despite challenges, she began to understand courage. Slowly, she began to see herself differently, not as the silent, invisible girl, but as someone capable of connection, learning, and growth. The mansion itself, once a symbol of isolation, started to feel less suffocating. Leela began exploring the gardens with Daniel, running her fingers over flowers, examining the fountain, and sometimes just sitting quietly beside him. She noticed things she had ignored before, the way sunlight reflected off water, the delicate patterns on leaves, the tiny insects moving across petals. Everything seemed more alive, more meaningful when shared with someone who cared. Her father, Richard, noticed the change too. He saw Leela smiling more often, more confident, more expressive. He wondered what had caused this transformation. Though he was curious, he was also cautious. Daniel was not part of their world, not part of their wealth or status. But Richard could not deny the joy that radiated from his daughter. For the first time, he realized that money and tutors alone could not fill the emptiness inside her. One day, as the sun began to set, Daniel signed something new to Leela. "You can do anything." Leela repeated the words slowly, forming the signs with care. She looked at Daniel and felt a surge of emotion. She had spent so long believing that she was limited by her silence, that she could never truly connect or achieve anything. But here was someone who believed in her, who treated her as capable, who showed her that hope was possible. In that moment, Leela realized that life could be different. She no longer had to be trapped in her golden cage, silent and unseen. There was someone who would help her, guide her, and believe in her when she struggled to believe in herself. For the first time in her life, she felt that the quiet world around her could be filled with meaning, warmth, and connection. From that day forward, the fountain became their meeting place, a sanctuary where learning, laughter, and understanding could happen naturally. Daniel never rushed her, never demanded perfection, and never judged her for her mistakes. He taught her that mistakes were part of learning, and that every small effort was worth celebrating. Leela's world expanded slowly, gently, but surely, and she began to understand the power of hope, patience, and kindness. And so, a simple act, a whisper of "I'll help you," changed everything. In the middle of her lonely, quiet life, Leela found someone who saw her. Someone who believed in her. Someone who gave her the first glimmer of hope she had felt in years. That hope, fragile and tender, began to grow, promising a brighter, more connected future that she had only dreamed of before. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Leela and Daniel grew stronger. Each afternoon, the fountain became a little world of its own, a place where Leela could forget the silent mansion, the empty rooms, and even her doubts. She began looking forward to these moments more than anything else in her life. Even the thought of the meeting made her heartbeat quicken with excitement. Daniel never pushed her. Some days, they would just sit quietly, hands moving slowly in the soft sunlight, sharing simple signs or just enjoying the warmth of the afternoon. Other days, he would teach her new words, showing her how to express more complex thoughts like friendship, dream, and trust. Each word was like a stepping stone across the river of her loneliness, giving her confidence to reach the other side. One day, as they were practicing, Daniel said something that made Leela pause. He formed the signs for feelings and then pointed at her. Leela looked at him curiously. Daniel then signed slowly, clearly, "You can show how you feel. You can tell me anything." Her fingers trembled as she tried to copy him. She had never allowed herself to open up completely to anyone before, not her tutors, not her father, not even her distant relatives who occasionally visited. But Daniel's calm presence made her feel safe, like no one would laugh at her, no one would ignore her feelings. Encouraged, Leela began to share small things about her life at the mansion. She told Daniel about the books she loved, about her favorite drawings, and about the little adventures she imagined in her room. She described the garden from her bedroom window, the way the fountain sparkled in sunlight, and the hidden paths she had never dared to explore. With every sign and gesture, her hands gained confidence, and her face lit up with joy. Daniel listened patiently, never interrupting, always nodding, smiling, or signing back words of encouragement. He understood that for Leela, every word she shared was a victory, a step toward expressing herself freely. He celebrated her successes with small gestures, a gentle clap, a thumbs up, or an approving smile. Leela realized that she had never experienced this kind of response before. Here, her voice, though silent, mattered. As their sessions continued, Leela discovered new things about Daniel, too. He shared little stories about his life, about the challenges of being a single father, about the joy of seeing his son learn something new every day. Leela realized that life was not always easy, even for adults, but it could be beautiful when one had love, patience, and determination. She began to see him as more than a teacher or a friend. He became a guide, someone who could show her that life could be lived fully, even in silence. One afternoon, Daniel suggested a small adventure. He led Leela to a part of the garden she had never explored, a quiet corner filled with wildflowers and tall trees. The air smelled fresh, and sunlight streamed through the leaves, casting playful shadows on the ground. Daniel handed Leela a notebook and pencil, encouraging her to draw what she saw. At first, Leela hesitated, but then her hand moved with growing confidence. She drew the trees, the flowers, and the patterns of sunlight on the grass. For the first time, she felt that she could capture not just what she saw, but what she felt. As Leela drew, Daniel signed something to her. "Your heart can speak." She paused and looked at him, understanding immediately. It was not about words or signs alone. It was about expressing the feelings that lived deep inside her, the emotions she had kept hidden for so long. Her drawings became more than pictures. They became a language of the heart, a bridge between her inner world and the world outside. Their bond extended beyond words and signs. Daniel taught Leela to notice little things in life, to pay attention to details, and to appreciate small moments. He would point to a butterfly resting on a flower and sign, "Beauty is everywhere if you look closely." He would show her the patterns of sunlight through the leaves and sign, "Even quiet things can be powerful." Slowly, Leela began to see life in a new way. She noticed colors more vividly, smells more distinctly, and even the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind seemed to have meaning. The biggest change, however, was in Leela's confidence. She began to move more freely, to speak through her hands without fear, and to try things she had never attempted before. She practiced signing sentences in front of Daniel, told stories using gestures, and even shared little jokes that made him laugh. She realized that communication was not just about words, it was about connecting, sharing, and being understood. And with Daniel, she finally felt understood. Back at the mansion, her father began to notice the transformation. Leela's tutors reported that she was more attentive, more confident, and more willing to engage in learning. Her drawings and writing had become more expressive, reflecting a new sense of joy. Richard, though initially skeptical about Daniel, could not ignore the changes. He wondered how a simple man with a modest life could have such an impact on his daughter. But deep down, he felt grateful that Leela was finding her voice, even if he did not fully understand how it happened. One day, Daniel introduced a new concept: storytelling through signs. He encouraged Leela to tell a story from her imagination, using signs, drawings, and gestures. Leela hesitated, unsure if she could do it, but Daniel's reassuring smile gave her courage. Slowly, she began forming signs, her fingers moving carefully, her eyes shining with concentration. She created a story about a small girl who lived in a quiet castle but dreamed of adventure and friendship. As she told the story, Daniel nodded and signed encouragement, celebrating every detail she shared. When she finished, Leela felt a surge of pride. She had never told a story aloud before, and even though it was in signs, it felt like speaking. Daniel's applause, gentle but genuine, made her feel valued. She realized that her silence was not a limitation. It was just a different way of expressing herself. The walls of isolation that had surrounded her for years were beginning to crumble, replaced by connection, understanding, and hope. As the weeks passed, Leela began sharing more of herself with Daniel. She talked about her dreams, her fears, and her longing for friendship. She signed about the moments when she felt invisible, about the times when she wished her father could see her not just as a child in a mansion but as a person with feelings. Daniel never judged her. He simply listened, guided, and encouraged. Through his patience, Leela learned that vulnerability was not a weakness but a strength, a bridge to real connection. One afternoon, while they were sitting under the tall trees in the garden, Daniel signed something that would stay with Leela forever. "You are capable of more than you know." She looked at him, her eyes wide, and nodded slowly. For the first time, she truly believed it. She realized that she had spent so many years doubting herself, feeling invisible and fearing rejection. But with Daniel's guidance, she discovered that her silence did not define her. Her abilities were limitless, and her heart could speak volumes if given the chance. The transformation did not happen overnight, but it was steady and profound. Leela began to approach her life at the mansion differently. She communicated more openly with her tutors, explored her creativity without fear, and even smiled more often at her father, who began to notice the spark in her eyes. She understood that help could come from unexpected places and that real connection was not about wealth or status. It was about understanding, patience, and genuine care. Through Daniel, Leela also learned empathy and kindness. She began helping his son with small lessons, showing patience she had never practiced before. She understood that care was not one way. It was shared, nurtured, and multiplied. These experiences shaped her, making her more confident, compassionate, and aware of the world around her. By the end of the third month, Leela had grown in ways that surprised everyone. She was no longer the quiet, withdrawn girl who sat by the window, staring at the world in longing. She was expressive, joyful, and confident. The golden mansion that once felt like a cage was now a place where she could explore, create, and even teach others in her own gentle way. And through it all, Daniel remained her guide, her friend, and the first person who had truly seen her. The small phrase he had whispered months ago, "I'll help you," had become a promise fulfilled. Leela now understood its meaning in her heart. Help was not just about teaching or guiding. It was about believing, encouraging, and walking beside someone until they found their own strength. And for Leela, that help had opened doors she never imagined existed, filling her life with hope, courage, and the knowledge that she was never truly alone. The months of joy and learning in the garden had brought Leela a new sense of hope, but life, as it often does, introduced challenges that tested her growth. One morning, Leela woke feeling unusually nervous. Today was not a day for drawing quietly or learning new signs with Daniel. It was a day she would face a different kind of challenge: social interaction outside her safe haven. Daniel had suggested that it was time for Leela to attend a small community event for children with special needs. At first, Leela hesitated. The idea of meeting so many people she didn't know all at once made her heart pound with fear. What if they laughed at her? What if she made mistakes? What if she could not communicate at all? She had felt comfortable with Daniel because he understood her completely, but the thought of strangers filled her with anxiety. Daniel noticed her hesitation. He knelt beside her and signed softly, "You can do this. I will be with you. Take one step at a time." Leela nodded, swallowing her fear. She trusted him, and that trust gave her courage. Still, as they arrived at the event, her stomach twisted. Children ran around, laughing, signing to each other with ease. Leela felt invisible, like she had been transported back into the lonely days before Daniel entered her life. The first few minutes were the hardest. Leela stayed close to Daniel, hiding behind him, unsure of how to approach anyone. She watched the other children interact effortlessly, forming friendships and playing games she didn't know how to join. Her heart ached with the familiar loneliness she had tried so hard to escape. She even thought about turning back and returning to the safe quiet of her mansion, but Daniel's gentle encouragement pulled her forward. "You have learned to speak with your heart," he signed. "Now try with your hands." Leela took a deep breath and slowly began to form simple signs, introducing herself to a girl nearby. Her hands trembled, but she managed to sign, "My name is Leela. I am learning." The girl smiled warmly and replied, signing back, "Hello, Leela. I am Anna. Let's play." Something shifted inside Leela. That small, friendly interaction sparked confidence she had never experienced in a group setting. She realized that other children could understand her and that she had something valuable to share. Slowly, she began moving through the crowd, introducing herself to more children and joining small games. Each new connection strengthened her courage, and by the end of the morning she was laughing silently, participating, and even helping another child with a sign they couldn't remember. Despite these small victories, the day was not without challenges. Leela noticed some children staring at her, whispering to each other. They were not unkind, but their curiosity made her self-conscious. She caught herself withdrawing, her old fear of being judged creeping in. Daniel saw her hesitation and signed, "It's okay to be scared." "You are brave for trying." Leela nodded, feeling the truth in his words. Fear was natural, but it did not define her. Her courage, her determination, and her trust in Daniel allowed her to keep moving forward. Back at the mansion, Leela faced another kind of obstacle, her father, Richard. He had observed her transformation with pride but also with unease. A single, working-class man had become an influential part of his daughter's life. Richard could not deny the positive changes, but he struggled to understand how Daniel, someone so different from their world, could guide Leela so effectively. One evening, Richard called Leela into his study. She felt her nerves twist inside her. She had grown confident with Daniel, but talking to her father in this way was different. She tried to prepare herself for questions, maybe even criticism, but Richard's eyes softened when he looked at her. "Leela," he began, signing slowly for her, "I have noticed changes. You are happier, more expressive, more yourself. I want to understand." Leela's chest swelled with relief. For the first time, her father spoke directly to her about her feelings, not her abilities or her progress. She signed back carefully, "Daniel helps me. He teaches me to show my heart." Richard's face reflected a mix of curiosity, admiration, and a twinge of worry. "I want to meet him," he signed. "I want to understand how he helps you." Leela felt a small rush of pride. She realized that Daniel's guidance had brought her closer to her father too. Yet, not all obstacles were external. Leela's own self-doubt sometimes crept back. She feared that her new skills, her confidence, and her joy were fragile, like delicate glass that could shatter at any moment. One afternoon, as she practiced storytelling with Daniel, she stumbled over a sign, unsure of the words she wanted to express. Frustration bubbled inside her, and for a moment she wanted to give up. Daniel noticed immediately. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and signed, "Mistakes are steps. Every effort matters. You are learning." His calm voice, filled with encouragement, reminded Leela of all she had accomplished. Slowly, her hand steadied and she tried again. She completed the story, signing each word carefully, her confidence returning with every movement. These challenges were not just lessons in communication. They were lessons in life. Leela began to understand that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to continue despite it. She saw that setbacks were not failures, but opportunities to learn and grow. With Daniel guiding her, she learned to face obstacles with determination and resilience. The next challenge came unexpectedly. During a visit to a local library, Leela spotted a group of children playing a game she had never seen before. They invited her to join, but she hesitated. The game involved quick responses, loud laughter, and coordination, things that had always intimidated her. She feared she would be left behind, misunderstood, or laughed at. Daniel knelt beside her once more. "You have overcome fear before. Try again," he signed. Leela took a deep breath, nodded, and joined the group. At first, she stumbled, hesitated, and watched as other children moved ahead. But slowly, she found her rhythm, using signs and gestures to communicate her moves. The children accepted her naturally, and soon she was laughing silently, fully engaged. When the game ended, Daniel clapped and signed, "See, you can do anything you try." Leela's face lit up with joy and pride. These experiences taught Leela that life was full of challenges, but also full of opportunities. She realized that every obstacle was a chance to grow, to learn, and to connect. With Daniel by her side, she could face difficulties that once seemed insurmountable. She began to apply this mindset to her daily life at the mansion, tackling tasks she had avoided for years and engaging more with tutors, servants, and even her father. One evening, after a particularly challenging day at the library, Leela sat with Daniel under the tall trees in the garden. She signed slowly, reflecting on the experiences of the day. "I was scared, but I did it." Daniel smiled warmly, signing back, "Fear is normal. Courage is trying anyway. You are brave." Leela felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She realized that courage was not just about grand gestures or heroic acts. It was about taking small steps every day, facing fears and trusting in oneself. She had learned to overcome obstacles both inside her heart and in the world around her. Even her relationship with her father began to change. Richard noticed her new resilience, her ability to express herself, and her willingness to engage with others. He began to participate more actively in her life, asking questions, learning a few signs, and showing genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings. Slowly, the distance that had separated them for years began to shrink. Leela felt a growing connection with him, strengthened by the skills and confidence she had gained with Daniel's guidance. But perhaps the most important lesson of all was the realization that help could come in unexpected ways. Leela understood that Daniel, a single father from a completely different world, had taught her more than words or signs. He had taught her courage, resilience, and the power of connection. He had shown her that every obstacle could be faced, every fear could be challenged, and every dream was worth pursuing. By the end of this chapter of her life, Leela was no longer the quiet, fearful girl who had hidden behind her mansion's walls. She was confident, resilient, and ready to face the world with hope. The challenges she had overcome had strengthened her, and the guidance she had received had given her the tools to navigate life with courage and grace. Through every challenge, Daniel remained a steady presence, a reminder that someone could believe in her even when she doubted herself. And through every obstacle, Leela learned that hope was not just a feeling, it was a choice, a commitment to face life with courage, determination, and trust in those who care. The lessons of fear, doubt, and resilience became part of her story, shaping her into a young girl ready to embrace the future. And as the sun set over the garden, casting warm golden light on the fountain where their journey had begun, Leela understood something she had never felt before. She was capable, she was seen, and she was never truly alone. The months of learning, laughter, and growth had brought Leela to a place she had never imagined. She was no longer the quiet, lonely girl who stared out of her bedroom window at the golden mansion. Her world had opened up, filled with connection, hope, and confidence. Yet the biggest test of all was yet to come, the moment when she would truly show her father herself and the world how far she had come. It began on a bright Saturday morning. Daniel suggested something new, a small performance at the local community center, a place where children could share their stories, talents, and creativity. The idea excited Leela but also filled her with nerves. Performing in front of an audience, even a small one, was something she had never attempted. What if she stumbled? What if no one understood her? The fear she had learned to manage still lingered. Daniel knelt beside her, his calm presence reassuring. "You have grown so much," he signed. "This is your moment. Show your heart. We will do it together." Leela nodded, taking a deep breath. She realized that the support she had received over the months had prepared her for this. She could communicate, express herself, and face challenges. This was the chance to prove it, not just to others but to herself. When they arrived at the community center, Leela saw children of all ages, some deaf, some hearing, all participating with excitement. Parents, teachers, and friends filled the small hall, clapping, smiling, and encouraging the performers. Leela felt her nerves tighten. She clutched her notebook and glanced at Daniel, who gave her a gentle nod. "Remember," he signed, "your story, your heart, your hands, let them speak." Leela walked onto the small stage, her hands trembling slightly. She faced the audience, her eyes scanning the crowd, looking for Daniel. His reassuring smile calmed her. She took a deep breath and began. She told a story entirely through signs and drawings, using her notebook as a visual aid. It was a story about a little girl who lived in a quiet mansion, invisible to the world, but who discovered hope and courage through the kindness of a stranger. The girl in the story learned to speak with her heart, to overcome fear and to find her voice. Every gesture, every sign, every drawing reflected Leela's own journey. At first, some audience members watched silently, unsure how to react. But as Leela continued, her confidence grew. Her signs became fluid, expressive, and filled with emotion. She told her story with clarity and passion. People began to smile, nod, and even lean forward, captivated by the courage and creativity radiating from the young girl on stage. Daniel sat at the front, his eyes shining with pride. He signed encouragement, subtly moving his hands to guide her when needed. Leela glanced at him from time to time, and each look gave her strength. She realized that the months of learning, the games, the small victories, and the moments of doubt had all prepared her for this moment. She was ready. When she finished, the audience erupted into applause. Some clapped, some waved, and some signed back words of admiration. Leela's heart soared. She had faced her fear and shared her story with the world. She had proven to herself that she could overcome obstacles, express her feelings, and inspire others. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, not just for her abilities but for who she was. After the performance, her father, Richard, approached. He had watched quietly from the side, observing every gesture, every sign, every movement. His eyes were filled with emotion. He knelt to meet Leela's gaze. I didn't realize how much you had grown," he signed carefully, unsure but sincere. "You are remarkable. I am proud of you." Leela's chest swelled with happiness. For years she had longed for these words, for genuine recognition from her father, and now here they were. She signed back slowly, "Thank you, Father. I have learned to speak my heart." Richard reached out and gently held her hands. He smiled, a mixture of pride, awe, and love shining in his eyes. "And who helped you?" he signed, looking at Daniel, who had stepped quietly to the side. Daniel smiled modestly. He shook his head, signing back. "She did all the work. I only guided her." But Richard saw something deeper, the bond, the patience, and the love that had nurtured Leela's growth. He realized that it was Daniel's faith in her that had sparked the change, that had helped her overcome fear and doubt. Over the next few days, the performance became a turning point. Leela's confidence extended beyond the community center. She spoke more freely at home, expressed her opinions to her tutors, and even initiated conversations with her father without hesitation. She realized that communication was not just about words or signs. It was about sharing her thoughts, her feelings, and her heart with others. Her relationship with her father continued to strengthen. Richard began learning simple signs himself, eager to communicate more naturally with his daughter. They spent evenings practicing together, laughing over mistakes and celebrating small victories. The mansion, which had once felt like a cage, now felt warm and welcoming. Leela's joy filled the halls, and her laughter became a part of its walls. Leela also continued her lessons with Daniel, not because she needed them, but because she loved them. She had grown close to his son, forming a small family-like bond. Together, they explored the garden, drew, shared stories, and learned from each other. The experiences had taught Leela empathy, patience, and kindness. She understood that helping others, just as Daniel had helped her, could create a ripple of hope and joy. One afternoon, while sitting at the fountain, Daniel signed something that made Leela pause. Look at how far you have come. From fear to courage, from silence to voice, from doubt to hope. Leela's eyes welled with tears. She realized that her journey had not just been about learning words or signs. It had been about discovering herself, finding strength she didn't know she had, and embracing life fully. Her thoughts wandered back to the days when she had sat by her window, feeling invisible and hopeless. She remembered the loneliness, the frustration, and the quiet despair. And now she felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for Daniel but for herself. She had faced her fears, trusted in guidance, and taken the steps necessary to grow. She had transformed, not overnight but through patience, perseverance, and love. The mansion began to change too. Richard, inspired by Leela's growth, became more present in her life. He made time to attend community events, joined her in learning new signs, and even participated in her small storytelling sessions. The walls that had once felt isolating now felt alive with laughter, communication, and love. Leela had not just found her voice, she had found a deeper connection with her family. The most significant lesson Leela learned was the power of hope and human kindness. Daniel had whispered months ago, "I'll help you," and that small promise had changed everything. It had given her the courage to believe in herself, to overcome fear, and to trust in the possibilities of life. Leela realized that help was not just about teaching skills, it was about belief, support, and unwavering encouragement. As the sun set over the mansion gardens, casting golden light across the fountains, Leela sat with Daniel and his son. She signed softly, "Thank you for everything." Daniel smiled, signing back, "You did it. You found your strength." "I only helped you see it." Leela nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. Her journey had started in silence, with loneliness and despair pressing against her heart. It had continued with learning, growth, and challenges that tested her courage. And now it had reached a point of triumph. A young girl who had discovered her voice, her confidence, and her hope, surrounded by people who cared deeply for her. In the days that followed, Leela continued to thrive. She shared her story with other children, inspiring them to face their fears and embrace their own strengths. She continued to draw, write, and perform, using her talents to communicate and connect. And every time she faced a new challenge, she remembered Daniel's gentle whisper, "I'll help you," and realized that she was never truly alone. Leela's life had transformed completely. She was no longer defined by her silence or her limitations. She was defined by her courage, her creativity, and her heart. She had discovered the power of hope, the joy of connection, and the impact of a single person's belief in another. And as she looked out over the mansion gardens, the sunlight sparkling on the fountains, she knew that her journey had only just begun. But now she was ready to embrace it fully, with courage, joy, and love.